When a struggling waitress collapses into the arms of the city's most dangerous crime lord, she doesn't know she's just sealed her fate. One touch, one look, one moment that will shatter everything she thought she knew about survival, power, and the thin line between protection and possession. In a world where loving the wrong man could get you killed, Elena Cross is about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only one worth making. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The crystal chandelier overhead cast fractured light across the pristine white tablecloths of Aurelius, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where a single reservation required 6 months of patience and a bank account that could survive the inevitable devastation. Elena Cross moved through the space like a ghost, her black server's uniform blending into the shadows between tables, her presence designed to be invisible until the moment someone needed their wine refilled or their course cleared. That was the art of service in a place like this. Exist without existing, appear without being seen, anticipate without intruding. Elena had perfected that art over 3 grueling years. She was 23 and exhausted in ways that sleep could never fix. Her feet ached in the mandatory designer heels, a cruel requirement for a job that kept her standing 12 hours straight. Her lower back had developed a permanent throb that ibuprofen barely touched. The smile she wore was a carefully constructed mask, professional and distant, hiding the hollow desperation that had become her constant companion since her mother's death 2 years ago. Medical bills, funeral costs, rent in a city that devoured the weak. Elena had learned quickly that survival meant swallowing pride, accepting humiliation, and becoming whatever people needed her to be for the duration of their meal. Tonight was particularly brutal. A private event in the Aurora Room, the restaurant's most opulent space, reserved for clients whose wealth made them untouchable. Elena had been assigned to the service team purely by chance when another server called in sick. The maitre d' had looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. "Don't embarrass us," he'd said, straightening her collar with rough fingers. "These guests, they notice everything. One mistake and you're gone." Elena had nodded, swallowed her anxiety, and stepped into the role. The Aurora Room lived up to its name. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering Manhattan skyline, the city spread out like scattered diamonds against black velvet. The room itself was designed for intimidation, marble floors that echoed every footstep, walls adorned with art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, a table that could seat 20, but tonight held only 12. 12 men who moved through the world like apex predators. Elena didn't need to be told who they were. She'd lived in New York long enough to recognize power when she saw it, the kind that didn't announce itself but simply existed, absolute and unchallenged. These men wore their authority in the set of their shoulders, the casual way they occupied space, the silence that fell when they spoke. They were dangerous. Every survival instinct Elena possessed screamed that truth at her. She kept her head down, her movements efficient and unobtrusive. Pour the wine. Clear the plates. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't draw attention. For 2 hours, she succeeded. The conversations around the table were conducted in low voices, fragments of discussions about territories and shipments and negotiations that made Elena's blood run cold. She forced herself not to listen, not to process, not to remember. Whatever these men were discussing, it wasn't her business. Her business was surviving her shift and getting home to her cramped studio apartment in Queens. It was during the dessert course that everything shattered. Elena had just finished placing the final plate, an architectural masterpiece of dark chocolate and gold leaf that probably cost more than her weekly salary, when her heel caught on an imperceptible irregularity in the marble floor. For one suspended moment, she felt her balance fail, her body tilting forward, the silver tray in her hand slipping from her grip. She was going to fall. Hard. Publicly. Disastrously. The tray clattered against marble, the sound explosive in the elegant space. But Elena didn't hit the ground. Strong hands caught her, steadying her with effortless strength, pulling her upright before her knees could connect with the unforgiving floor. The grip was firm but strangely gentle, fingers wrapped around her upper arms, holding her suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch beyond normal time. "Careful," The voice was deep, controlled, with an undercurrent of something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Elena's breath caught. She looked up and immediately wished she hadn't. The man holding her was devastating. Not handsome in any conventional sense, but compelling in a way that bypassed rational thought and struck something primitive in her hindbrain. He was perhaps 35, with sharp features that suggested both ruthlessness and restraint. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Eyes the color of smoke and steel, intelligent and assessing, currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously visible and vulnerable. He wore a three-piece suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. Charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, fitted to his powerful frame with the precision of bespoke tailoring. A white shirt, pristine and crisp. No tie, the top button undone in a concession to casual authority. But it wasn't his appearance that made Elena's pulse spike. It was the way he looked at her, as if she was the only person in the room, in the city, in the world. As if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Elena's voice came out strangled. She cleared her throat, tried again. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean... Are you hurt? The question cut through her apology, direct and unexpectedly concerned. Elena blinked, thrown off balance by the gentleness in his tone. No, I'm fine. Thank you for... Lucian. She stared at him, confused. One corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. My name? You should know it, since I'm apparently responsible for saving you from a very ungraceful landing. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Around them, the other men at the table had fallen silent, watching the interaction with varying degrees of interest and wariness. Elena was acutely aware that she was still standing impossibly close to this stranger, that his hands were still on her arms, that every second of contact was a violation of the professional distance she was supposed to maintain. She stepped back and his hands fell away immediately, though his gaze never wavered. I need to clean this up. I'm so sorry for the disruption. She knelt quickly, reaching for the fallen tray, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered scattered utensils. She could feel his eyes on her, a physical weight that made her hyper-aware of every movement. Leave it. Elena looked up sharply. Lucian, because apparently that was his name, was still watching her, his expression unreadable. Sir? Leave it, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. He glanced at one of the other servers hovering near the door. James, handle the cleanup. The server moved immediately, practically running to obey. Lucian returned his attention to Elena, who was still kneeling on the floor, frozen between competing instincts to obey, to flee, to apologize again. Stand up, he said quietly. It wasn't a request. Elena rose slowly, acutely conscious of how disheveled she must look, her carefully pinned hair coming loose, her uniform slightly askew from the near fall. She clasped her hands in front of her to hide their shaking. What's your name? The question surprised her. Men like him didn't ask names. Servers were interchangeable, invisible, beneath notice. Elena, she whispered. Elena. He said it slowly, as if testing the syllables, committing them to memory. You work here often. 3 years, sir. And in 3 years, have you ever fallen before? The question was delivered without mockery, genuine curiosity in his tone. Elena shook her head mutely. Lucian tilted his head slightly, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Are you afraid of me, Elena? The honest answer rose to her lips before she could stop it. Yes. Something flickered in his expression. Not offense, but something closer to satisfaction. Smart girl. He gestured to the empty chair beside him, currently vacant because they were one guest short of a full party. Sit. Elena's eyes widened. I can't. I'm working. I shouldn't. I'm giving you permission. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Sit down. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was wrong, that sitting at a table with guests violated every rule of her employment, that the maitre d' would fire her on the spot if he saw this. But something in Lucian's gaze told her that refusing would be far more dangerous than obeying. Elena sat. The chair was impossibly comfortable, the kind of furniture designed for people who never worried about rent or groceries or keeping the electricity on. From this angle, the view of Manhattan was even more spectacular, the city lights creating a constellation of human ambition and achievement. Elena had never seen it from this side of the table. "When did you last eat?" The question came from her left. Elena turned to find Lucian watching her with an expression that might have been concern on someone less controlled. This morning," she lied. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Try again." The truth slipped out before she could censor it. "Yesterday, maybe the day before. I don't remember." She didn't know why she was being honest with this stranger. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the surreal quality of the moment. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with a focused attention that made her feel like her answer actually mattered. Lucian didn't respond immediately. Instead, he signaled to James, who appeared instantly at his elbow. "Bring me the tasting menu, all of it. Fresh preparations." James hesitated. "Sir, the kitchen is beginning to close." Lucian turned his head slowly, and the server went pale. "All of it," Lucian repeated softly. "Immediately." "Yes, sir." "Of course." James disappeared. Elena stared at Lucian, confusion warring with a strange flutter in her chest. "You don't need to eat. I know what I need to do." He turned back to her, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "Tell me about yourself, Elena." It wasn't a request for polite small talk. It was a command for truth. "There's nothing to tell," she managed. "Everyone has a story." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, as if having a server sitting at his exclusive dinner table was perfectly normal. "Humor me." Around them, the other men had returned to their own conversations, though Elena noticed several still watching with barely concealed curiosity. She had the distinct impression that whatever was happening here was unusual even by their standards. "I'm a waitress," Elena said carefully. "I work. I pay my bills. That's it." "Family?" The word struck like a physical blow. Elena's throat tightened. "No, not anymore." Lucian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a softening around his eyes that might have been sympathy. "I'm sorry." The genuine quality of his condolence undid something in her chest. Elena looked down at her hands, fighting the sudden burn behind her eyes. She never cried. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, a weakness that would drown her if she let it. "My mother died 2 years ago," she heard herself say. "Cancer. The medical bills, I'm still paying them off." "And your father?" "Gone. He left when I was 8. I don't know where he is. Don't care to." The truth hung between them, raw and unvarnished. When Elena finally gathered the courage to look up, she found Lucian watching her with an expression that made her pulse spike. Not pity, but recognition. As if he understood exactly what it meant to be alone in a city that crushed the vulnerable. "You're surviving," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway. "Barely," she whispered. The food arrived then, course after exquisite course. James and 2 other servers laid out a feast that belonged in a magazine spread, delicate compositions of flavor and artistry that Elena had served 1,000 times but never tasted. Lucian gestured to the plates. "Eat!" Elena shook her head. "I can't accept. It's not a gift." His tone was firm but not unkind. "It's a condition of this conversation continuing. Eat, Elena." She didn't understand why this powerful stranger cared whether she ate or not, but her body, starved and desperate, made the decision for her. She picked up the fork with trembling fingers and took a bite of something that melted on her tongue, flavors exploding across her palate with an intensity that made her close her eyes. When had she forgotten that food could taste like this? When had survival become so consuming that she'd forgotten to actually live? "Better?" Lucian's voice was closer now, low and intimate. Elena opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression that made heat coil low in her stomach, satisfaction mixed with something darker, more possessive. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Keep eating." So she did, course after course, while Lucian asked her questions, careful, probing inquiries that somehow bypassed her defenses and drew out truths she never shared with anyone. He learned about her mother's final months, the hospital vigils, the crushing weight of watching someone you love deteriorate piece by piece. He learned about her apartment, barely large enough for a bed and a hot plate, in a neighborhood where sirens were a nightly lullaby. He learned about her dreams, small, practical dreams of stability and security, nothing grandiose or impossible. Through it all, he listened with complete attention, as if her story was the most important thing in his world. Elena didn't understand it, didn't understand why this man, clearly powerful, clearly dangerous, would waste time on someone like her. "Why are you being kind to me?" she finally asked, setting down her fork after what must have been the 8th or ninth course. Lucian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her shiver. "Because I recognize you." "You've never met me before." "I recognize what you are," he clarified. "Someone strong enough to survive what should have broken you. Someone who keeps going even when every reason to quit is staring you in the face." He paused. "That kind of strength is rare, Elena, worth noticing." The compliment landed like a physical touch, warming places inside her that had been cold for so long. "I'm not strong," she said quietly. "I'm just out of options." Strength and desperation often look the same. Lucian's gaze held hers. "But you're wrong. You have options now." Elena's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, one of the other men at the table, a broad-shouldered figure with silver threading his dark hair, cleared his throat pointedly. "Lucian, we need to discuss the Brooklyn situation." Lucian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For a moment, Elena thought he would refuse, would continue their conversation despite the interruption. Instead, he turned to her, and the regret in his expression caught her off guard. "I need to handle business," he said, "but this conversation isn't finished." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a card, heavy stock, expensive, with nothing but a phone number embossed in silver. "Take this." Elena stared at the card as if it might bite her. "I don't—" "Take it," he repeated, pressing it into her palm. His fingers brushed hers, and Elena felt the contact like electricity. "Call me tomorrow. We'll continue this discussion somewhere less public." "I don't think—" "Elena." The way he said her name was both a caress and a command. "I want to see you again. Tell me you'll consider it." She should say no. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at her to refuse, to walk away from whatever this was before it consumed her. But those eyes, smoke and steel and something that looked dangerously like hunger, held her captive. "I'll consider it," she whispered. Lucian smiled then, a real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. "Good girl." The praise shouldn't have affected her, but it did, sending warmth cascading through her chest. "You can go," he said gently. "I'm sure your supervisor is wondering where you disappeared to." Elena stood on shaking legs, still clutching the card. She should thank him, should say something appropriate and professional. Instead, she simply looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Recognition. As if they'd both been alone in crowded rooms their entire lives, and had finally found someone who understood what that meant. "Good night, Lucian," she managed. "Good night, Elena." She walked away feeling his gaze on her back like a brand. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. The maitre d' cornered her near the kitchen, furious and bewildered. "What the hell was that? You don't sit with guests, you don't—" "Mr. Moretti requested my presence," Elena interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. The maitre d' went pale. "Moretti? Lucian Moretti?" Elena nodded. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something between fear and calculation. "I see. Well, in that case, carry on." He disappeared, leaving Elena more confused than before. Who was Lucian Moretti, that his name could stop her supervisor mid-tirade? She didn't have time to investigate. The kitchen was closing, final checks were being completed, and Elena had to cash out her meager tips, barely enough to cover her subway fare home. It was past midnight when she finally stepped out into the Manhattan night. The city was alive even at this hour, taxis streaming past, people heading to late-night clubs or early morning shifts, the endless churn of urban existence. Elena pulled her thin jacket tighter and started the long walk to the subway. She made it half a block before the black car pulled up beside her. It was sleek and expensive, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. Elena's heart kicked into overdrive, Memories of news reports about women disappearing off city streets flooding her mind. She walked faster. The car kept pace, smooth and silent. Then the rear window lowered, and Lucian's face appeared. "Get in." Elena stopped, her breath coming short and fast. "I'm fine walking." "It's nearly 1 in the morning, and you're alone on a Manhattan street. You're not fine. Get in the car, Elena." I'm not asking." His tone hardened. "Get in the car, or I'll get out and put you in myself. Your choice." It should have terrified her, should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Instead, Elena found herself opening the door and sliding into the back seat. The interior was all dark leather and subtle luxury, warm and quiet, sealed off from the city's noise. Lucian sat across from her, having returned to that composed, controlled state that seemed to be his default. "Where do you live?" he asked. Elena hesitated, instinctively wary of giving her address to a stranger. Lucian's mouth quirked. "I can find out easily enough, but I'd prefer you tell me." The casual confidence in that statement, the implication that he had resources to locate her if he wanted, should have been alarming. "Queens," Elena said quietly. "Woodside." Lucian relayed the information to the driver through a privacy screen, then settled back and turned his full attention on her. "You're afraid of me," he observed. "But you got in the car anyway." "You didn't give me much choice." "There's always a choice, Elena. You chose to get in. Why?" The question demanded honesty. Elena pulled her jacket tighter, a defensive gesture. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I'm too tired to be smart. Maybe I've forgotten how to protect myself." She met his gaze. "Or maybe something in me recognizes that you're dangerous, but not to me." Lucian's expression shifted, approval in something darker, more intense. "Perceptive," he murmured. "You're right. I am dangerous. More than you can possibly imagine. But never to you." The certainty in his voice made her shiver. "Why?" Elena asked. "Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me." "I know enough." Lucian leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I know you're alone in a city that eats the vulnerable. I know you're starving yourself to pay off debts that aren't your fault. I know you're exhausted and running on fumes and about 3 bad days from collapse." The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. "I also know," he continued, "that despite all of that, you haven't broken. You keep showing up, keep surviving. That kind of strength—" He paused, something fierce crossing his features. "That's rare, Elena. Worth protecting." "I don't need protection." "Everyone needs protection." His tone brooked no argument. "The only question is whether they're smart enough to accept it when it's offered." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "And what would you want in return?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Lucian was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "Honesty," he finally said. "Transparency. Your time when I ask for it." He paused. "And eventually, when you're ready, trust." "That's all?" "For now." The qualifier sent a shiver down her spine. "I don't understand you," Elena whispered. "Men like you don't notice people like me. We exist in completely different worlds." "Maybe that's exactly why I noticed you." Lucian's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "You're real, Elena. No pretense, no calculation, no agenda. Just survival and honesty and strength you don't even realize you have." He leaned back, but his gaze never wavered. "That's more valuable than anything money can buy." The car glided through the streets, carrying them from Manhattan's gleaming towers into Queens' more modest neighborhoods. Elena watched the city transform outside the window, familiar territory approaching, and felt reality crashing back down around her. This was insane. Whatever this was, this attention from a powerful stranger, this strange connection that felt both terrifying and inevitable, it couldn't be real, couldn't last. Men like Lucian Moretti didn't care about struggling waitresses. "I should warn you," Lucian said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I don't do anything halfway. When I decide I want something, I claim it, completely." Elena's pulse spiked. "I'm not something to be claimed." "No," he agreed. "You're someone to be protected, valued, given the space and security to become who you're meant to be. instead of just surviving day to day. His eyes held hers. But make no mistake, Elena, I'm a possessive man. If you let me into your life, I won't settle for half measures or casual interest. You're talking about things I never agreed to. I'm talking about possibilities. Lucian's smile was slight but genuine. But I'm also warning you. Being near me comes with complications, dangers you can't imagine. If you're smart, you'll throw away that card and forget tonight ever happened. The car pulled to a stop in front of Elena's building, a shabby 5-story walk-up that looked even more depressing after the luxury she'd been surrounded by all evening. Lucian glanced out the window, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "This is where you live?" Elena lifted her chin defensively. "It's what I can afford." He didn't comment, but she saw the calculation in his eyes, the barely concealed disapproval. The driver opened her door from outside, and Elena realized he'd moved with silent efficiency, ready to help her out. She started to exit, then paused, turning back to Lucian. "Why me?" she asked one more time. "Really?" Lucian met her gaze, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "Because when I caught at you tonight, and you looked up at me with those eyes, scared but trying so damn hard to be brave, something in me recognized something in you." He paused. "Like calling to like, darkness to darkness, survival to survival." "I'm not dark," Elena whispered. "Maybe not yet." His smile was slight and sad. "But you understand what it means to be invisible, to be overlooked, to move through the world alone." He leaned forward. "I see you, Elena, all of you, and I have no intention of letting you disappear back into the shadows." The declaration should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Elena stepped out of the car, then turned back one final time. "The card," she said. "If I call, what happens?" Lucian's expression was unreadable. "Everything changes." "That's not an answer." "It's the only honest one I can give you." He held her gaze. "Call me tomorrow, Elena, or don't. But either way, we both know you're already mine." Before she could respond to that arrogant, impossible claim, the door closed and the car pulled away, leaving her standing on the cracked sidewalk in front of her building, clutching a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Elena climbed 5 flights of stairs to her studio apartment, let herself in, and locked the door behind her. The space was exactly as she'd left it, cramped and shabby and depressingly empty. A mattress on the floor, a hot plate in the corner that served as her kitchen, a single window with a view of the building next door. This was her life. This was her reality. And yet, Elena looked down at the card still clutched in her hand. Just a phone number. No name, no address, no explanation, just a connection to a man who'd looked at her like she mattered. She should throw it away. Should forget tonight ever happened and go back to the safe, predictable misery of her existence. But something in her, some small, desperate part that she'd thought long dead, whispered a different truth. What if this was her chance? Her one opportunity to escape the slow death of poverty and exhaustion? What if Lucian Moretti was exactly what he seemed to be? Dangerous, yes, but also offering something she'd never had before. A choice. Elena set the card on her makeshift nightstand and lay down on her mattress, still fully dressed, too exhausted to change. But sleep didn't come easily. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and remembered the way Lucian had looked at her, the way he'd caught her when she fell, the way his voice had softened when he learned about her mother, the way he'd said her name. Like it mattered, like she mattered. Elena had spent 2 years convinced she'd never matter to anyone again. Maybe it was time to test that assumption. Her hand reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the card. Tomorrow. She'd decide tomorrow. But deep down, in places she was afraid to examine too closely, Elena knew the decision was already made. Everything was about to change. And terrifying as that was, some part of her was ready for it, ready to be seen, to be valued, to be something more than just another invisible girl struggling to survive in a city that didn't care whether she lived or died. Outside her window, the city hummed its endless song, sirens and traffic, and the white noise of millions of lives intersecting and diverging. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena didn't feel quite so alone. Somewhere out there, a dangerous man with smoke and steel eyes was thinking about her. And tomorrow, if she was brave enough, she'd call him, and everything would change. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her window, harsh and unforgiving. For a disoriented moment, she thought last night had been a dream. The fall. The stranger with steel-gray eyes, the impossible conversation that had left her feeling more exposed than she'd been in years. Then she turned her head and saw the card on her nightstand. Real. It had all been real. Her phone read 6:47 a.m. She had a shift at Aurelia starting at 11, which gave her exactly 4 hours to decide whether she was brave enough or foolish enough to use that number. Elena sat up slowly, her body protesting the movement. She was still wearing yesterday's uniform, wrinkled and uncomfortable, a physical reminder of how completely her life had been upended in the span of a single evening. She picked up the card, studying it in the morning light. The number was embossed in silver, elegant and minimal. No name, no context. Just 10 digits that represented a doorway into something she didn't understand. What did Lucian Moretti want from her? Really? Men like him, powerful, wealthy, commanding, didn't pursue struggling waitresses out of altruism. There had to be an angle, a purpose she wasn't seeing. Maybe he collected broken things. Maybe this was some elaborate game the rich played when they got bored. Or maybe, whispered a small voice in the back of her mind, he meant exactly what he said. Maybe he saw something in her worth noticing. Elena stood and moved to her bathroom, barely large enough to turn around in with a shower that only produced lukewarm water on good days. She stripped off her uniform and stepped under the spray, letting the water wash away the physical residue of yesterday. But it couldn't wash away the memory of Lucian's hands catching her, the intensity in his gaze, the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. She dressed in her only pair of jeans and a faded sweater, then made instant coffee on her hot plate. The bitter liquid did nothing to settle her nerves. The card sat on her mattress, accusatory and tempting in equal measure. Elena checked the time again. 7:23 a.m. Too early to call, surely. He'd said to call today, but that didn't mean at dawn. She lasted until 8:15 before her resolve crumbled. Her hand shook slightly as she dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, he answered. Elena. Not a question. He knew it was her, had probably known the moment his phone rang. How did you know it was me? The question came out more breathless than she intended. I've been waiting for your call. His voice was rough, as if he'd just woken up, and the intimacy of that realization sent heat through her chest. I wasn't sure you'd be brave enough. I'm not brave, Elena said quietly. I'm just tired of being invisible. Silence on the other end, weighted and thoughtful. You were never invisible to me, Lucian finally said. Not from the first moment. Elena's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to that kind of intensity, that casual declaration that she mattered. You said we should continue our conversation somewhere less public, she managed. Did you mean that? Every word. No hesitation. Are you free today? I have a shift at 11. Call in sick. Lena blinked. I can't just... Yes, you can. His tone was firm, but not unkind. One shift, Elena. The world won't end, and I promise to make it worth your while. She should say no, should protect the job that barely kept her afloat, the fragile stability she'd fought so hard to maintain. But when had playing it safe ever given her anything except exhaustion and loneliness? Okay, she whispered. She heard his satisfaction in the brief pause that followed. Good girl, I'll send a car for you. Be ready in an hour. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without interruption. A beat of silence. Somewhere I can feed you properly and learn everything about you that I didn't get to last night. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down her spine. 1 hour, Lucian repeated. Don't be late, Elena. The line went dead before she could respond. Elena stared at her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she just agreed to? She called Aurelius, her voice hoarse as she told the maitre d' she was sick. He was surprisingly understanding, probably still rattled by whatever power Lucian's name carried. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she swallowed it down. Then she stood in the middle of her tiny apartment and confronted the reality that she had nothing appropriate to wear for wherever Lucian was taking her. Her wardrobe consisted of her work uniform, One pair of jeans, two sweaters, and a dress she'd bought for her mother's funeral. That was it. Everything else had been sold or donated when she'd downsized after her mother's death, sacrificed to make rent and pay bills. In the end, she settled for her jeans and the better of her two sweaters, a soft gray that wasn't too threadbare. She let her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders, and applied the minimal makeup she owned. Looking in the cracked mirror above her bathroom sink, Elena barely recognized herself. When had she stopped caring about her appearance? When had survival become so consuming that she'd forgotten what it felt like to want to look nice for someone? The car arrived exactly 1 hour later, the same sleek black vehicle from last night. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, greeted her professionally and held the door. Elena slid into the back seat, her nerves singing with anticipation and fear. They drove into Manhattan, but not to any restaurant or public space. Instead, the car pulled up in front of a towering residential building on the Upper East Side, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. "Mr. Moretti is waiting for you," the driver said, gesturing to the entrance where a doorman stood ready. Elena's pulse spiked. "This is where he lives?" "Yes, ma'am." Of course it was. Where else would someone like Lucian Moretti live except in one of Manhattan's most exclusive addresses? The doorman ushered her inside with practiced deference, directing her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. The elevator rose smoothly, numbers climbing, 20 floors, 30, 40, until it finally stopped at the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that stole Elena's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering panoramic views of Manhattan that made the city look like a living photograph. The interior was all clean lines and expensive materials, dark wood, pale stone, furniture that looked both impossibly comfortable and artfully designed. Art hung on the walls, pieces that Elena suspected were originals rather than prints. This wasn't just wealth. This was power made physical, a space designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. "Hello, Elena." She turned to find Lucian emerging from what appeared to be a study, dressed more casually than last night, dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing muscled forearms. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and the intimacy of that detail made her acutely aware that they were alone in his home. "This is where you live?" The question came out almost accusatory. Lucian's mouth quirked. "Does it frighten you?" "Everything about you frightens me," Elena admitted. "Good." He moved closer, stopping just inside her personal space. "Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you careful." His eyes searched hers. "But you came anyway." "You didn't give me much choice." "There's always a choice." He repeated the words from last night, his voice low and intimate. "You could have ignored my call, could have blocked my number, could have stayed safely in your apartment and gone to your shift like nothing happened." He tilted his head slightly. "But you didn't. Why?" Elena met his gaze, refusing to look away despite the intensity she found there. "Because I'm tired of just surviving. Because something in me wants to know what happens if I say yes to you." She paused. "And because you looked at me like I was real." Something fierce crossed Lucian's expression. "You are real, Elena. More real than anyone I've met in years." He gestured toward the dining area, where a table had been set with what looked like a full breakfast spread. "Come, eat. We have a lot to discuss." Elena followed him, still overwhelmed by the sheer luxury surrounding her. The table held more food than she could eat in a week: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways, bacon, smoked salmon, yogurt with honey, and berries. "This is too much," she said faintly. "Sit," Lucian commanded gently. She sat. He took the chair across from her, closer than strictly necessary, his presence overwhelming even in the spacious room. "Eat," he said. "And while you do, I'm going to tell you some things. Things you deserve to know before this goes any further." Elena's stomach clenched with anxiety, but she reached for a pastry, needing something to do with her hands. Lucian leaned back in his chair, watching her with that unnerving focus. "What do you know about me, Elena? What did you piece together from last night?" She swallowed her bite of pastry, considering her words carefully. "You're wealthy, powerful. The other men at that table deferred to you, which means you're in charge of something significant." She paused. And my supervisor was terrified when I mentioned your name. Perceptive, Lucian murmured. What else? The conversation I overheard, territories, shipments, negotiations that sounded anything but legal. Elena's voice dropped. You're involved in something dangerous, something criminal. I run a criminal empire, Lucian said bluntly, his tone matter-of-fact. I control territories across the eastern seaboard. My organization handles everything from imports to real estate to financial manipulation. I have politicians in my pocket, law enforcement on my payroll, and enough legitimate business fronts to make prosecuting me nearly impossible. The casual way he delivered this information was almost more shocking than the content itself. Elena set down her pastry, her appetite vanishing. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want there to be any illusions between us. Lucian's gaze never wavered. You asked what I want from you. The answer is complicated, but it starts with honesty. I won't lie to you about who I am or what I do. You're a criminal, Elena said, the words tasting strange on her tongue. Yes. You hurt people when necessary. No apology in his tone. But I'm not needlessly cruel. I don't prey on the innocent. My enemies are people who chose this life, who know the rules of the game we play. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. And you think that makes it acceptable? I think it makes it reality. Lucian leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. The world isn't divided into good people and bad people, Elena. It's far more complicated than that. I've done things that would horrify you, but I've also protected thousands of people who work for me, built communities that law enforcement abandoned, ensured stability in chaos. That sounds like rationalization. Maybe it is. He didn't flinch from her assessment. But it's also the truth. I am what I am. I won't pretend otherwise, and I won't apologize for surviving in a world that was designed to destroy people like me. The vulnerability in that last statement caught Elena off guard. People like you? Lucian was quiet for a moment, something dark crossing his expression. I wasn't born to this, Elena. I built it from nothing, from poverty and violence and a childhood that taught me the only law that matters is power. His voice hardened. I learned early that the world doesn't care about fairness or justice. It cares about strength, so I became strong enough that no one could hurt me again. The words resonated in Elena's chest, uncomfortably familiar. Hadn't she learned the same lesson? Hadn't survival taught her that vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford? Why are you telling me all this? She asked again. Why would you reveal this to someone you barely know? Because I want you to make an informed choice. Lucian's gaze held hers with unwavering intensity. Being near me is dangerous. My enemies would use you to hurt me if they knew you mattered. My lifestyle involves risks that most people can't imagine. If you choose to let me into your life, really into your life, you need to understand what you're accepting. Elena's pulse hammered in her throat. And what exactly am I accepting? Me, Lucian said simply. All of me. The power and the danger and the complications. But also, he paused, and for the first time, she saw something almost uncertain in his expression. Also protection, security, a life where you don't have to starve yourself to pay rent, where you can breathe without constantly calculating survival. In exchange for what? Your trust, your time, your honesty. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. And eventually, if you choose it, everything else. The implication hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elena stood abruptly, needing space from the intensity of his presence. She walked to the windows, staring out at Manhattan spread below like a kingdom. This is insane, she said quietly. We don't know each other. You're a stranger who caught me when I fell. That's not enough to base whatever this is on. She heard Lucian stand, felt him approach, though he didn't touch her. You're right, he said. We are strangers. But I felt something when I caught you last night. A recognition. Like finding something I didn't know I'd been searching for. He moved closer, and she could feel the heat of him at her back. Tell me you didn't feel it too. Elena closed her eyes, fighting the truth rising in her chest. I felt it. Then give me a chance to prove this isn't insane. His voice was low, persuasive. Let me show you what your life could be. No commitments, no expectations beyond spending time with me. Just possibility. She turned to face him, and the emotion in his expression stole her breath. This powerful, dangerous man was looking at her like she held something he desperately needed. "I don't understand what you see in me," Elena whispered. "I'm nobody. Nothing. Just a girl who serves food and can barely keep herself alive." Lucian's hand lifted, his fingers gentle as they traced the line of her jaw. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. "You're someone who survived what should have broken you," he said quietly. "Someone who keeps fighting even when there's no logical reason to continue. Someone honest enough to admit fear, but brave enough to face it anyway." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "That's not nothing, Elena. That's extraordinary." Tears burned behind her eyes. When had anyone seen her this clearly? "What do you want from me today?" she managed. "Just your company." Lucian's hand fell away, though his gaze remained intense. "Finish breakfast. Then I want to show you something." Elena returned to the table, her appetite mysteriously restored now that the weight of his revelation had been lifted. She ate while Lucian asked her questions, careful, probing inquiries about her childhood, her mother. Her dreams before survival became the only goal that mattered. She found herself answering with an honesty that surprised her, telling him about the books she'd loved as a child, the way her mother had sung while cooking, the small apartment in Queens that had been filled with laughter before illness stole everything. Lucian listened with complete attention, occasionally asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to speak. When breakfast was finished, he led her to his study, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. But it was the wall safe he opened that caught her attention. Lucian withdrew a thick folder and returned to where she stood. "What's that?" Elena asked. "Your medical debt," Lucian said calmly. "All of it. Every outstanding bill from your mother's treatment, every collection notice, every late fee." He held out the folder. "It's been paid in full as of this morning." Elena stared at him, her mind refusing to process what he'd just said. "What?" "Your debt. It's gone." That's over $80,000. Her voice came out strangled. $83,427, Lucian corrected, plus interest and fees. Elena's knees went weak. She sat down hard in the nearest chair, the folder falling from nerveless fingers. "You can't just... I didn't ask you to..." "I know you didn't ask. That's why I did it." Lucian crouched in front of her, his hands resting on the arms of her chair, caging her in. "You've been drowning, Elena, slowly suffocating under debt that wasn't your fault. I simply removed the weight. I can't accept this." But even as she said it, Elena felt something breaking open in her chest, relief so profound it was almost painful. "This is too much. I don't..." "It's done," Lucian said firmly. "The money's transferred. The accounts are settled. You couldn't return it even if you wanted to." Elena looked up at him, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. "Why would you do this for me?" Lucian's expression softened. He reached up, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Because I can. Because you needed it. Because watching you carry that burden was unacceptable to me. I don't know how to repay you. I don't want repayment." His voice was fierce. "This isn't a transaction, Elena. This is me removing an obstacle to your well-being. Nothing more." She couldn't stop crying, years of stress and fear and crushing responsibility pouring out of her in waves. Lucian pulled her up and into his arms, holding her while she shattered against his chest. He didn't try to quiet her or rush her through it. He simply held her, one hand stroking her hair, the other wrapped firmly around her waist, anchoring her through the storm. When Elena finally calmed, exhausted, and wrung out, she pulled back slightly to look at him. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucian's smile was gentle. "You're welcome." "I still don't understand why..." "Because you matter to me," he interrupted. "I know it's fast. I know it doesn't make logical sense. But from the moment I caught you last night, something in me claimed you, and I take care of what's mine." "I'm not yours," Elena said, but the protest lacked conviction. "Not yet," Lucian agreed, "but you will be." The certainty in his voice sent shivers down her spine. He released her, stepping back to give her space. "Come. There's something else I want to show you." Still reeling, Elena followed him to another room, this one clearly a bedroom, dominated by a massive bed with dark sheets and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Lucian opened a closet and gestured inside. Elena's breath caught. The closet was filled with women's clothing, elegant dresses, casual wear, everything in her size, all in colors that would complement her complexion. "What is this?" she breathed. "Options," Lucian said simply. "I won't have you wearing threadbare sweaters when I take you out. Choose whatever appeals to you." Elena turned to stare at him. "You bought me a wardrobe?" "I had it delivered this morning while you were on your way here." He shrugged as if this was perfectly normal. "You needed clothes. Now you have them." "This is too much." But her fingers were already reaching for a soft blue dress, the fabric finer than anything she'd ever owned. "Nothing is too much for you," Lucian said quietly. "Not anymore." Elena selected the blue dress and changed in the bathroom, emerging to find Lucian waiting with an expression that made heat pool in her stomach. "Beautiful," he murmured. They spent the rest of the day together, talking, eating, existing in a bubble removed from reality. Lucian told her stories about building his empire, carefully edited versions that revealed his intelligence and strategic mind, without dwelling on the violence she knew must be part of it. Elena found herself relaxing in his presence, the initial fear giving way to something more complex: fascination, attraction, a dangerous sense of safety that she knew was probably illusory. As evening approached, Lucian moved to the window, his expression growing darker. "I need to tell you something else," he said. Elena joined him, anxiety creeping back. "What?" "The men at dinner last night. They noticed you. Noticed my interest." His jaw clenched. "Word will spread that I've claimed someone. That makes you vulnerable." "Claimed?" Elena's voice rose. "I never agreed." "I know." Lucian turned to her, regret in his eyes. "But perception matters in my world. Whether you accept me or not, my enemies will see you as leverage, a weakness to exploit." Fear spiked through her. "What does that mean?" "It means I need to protect you. Need to make sure no one can use you against me." He paused. "It means your old life, your apartment, your job, isn't safe anymore." Elena stepped back, shaking her head. "You can't just upend my entire existence because you've decided I matter." "I can and I will." No apology in his tone. "Your safety is non-negotiable." "This is insane!" Elena's voice broke. "I came here for breakfast, for conversation, not to have my whole life rearranged." "I know." Lucian's expression was firm, but not unkind. "But this is the reality of being connected to me. I warned you there would be complications." Elena paced the length of the room, her mind racing. "What are you saying? That I have to leave my home, give up my independence?" "I'm saying you need protection until I can ensure no one will target you." He caught her arm gently, stopping her movement. "Stay here. Let me keep you safe while I handle this." "Stay here?" She stared at him. "In your apartment?" "Yes." "Absolutely not." "Elena." "No!" She pulled away from him, anger and fear warring in her chest. "I don't care how much money you have or how dangerous your world is. I'm not some possession you can just move around at will." Lucian was silent for a long moment, studying her with that intense gaze. Then surprisingly he nodded. "You're right. I'm being too controlling." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "But I can't just ignore the danger. Let me at least station security near your apartment. Let me know you're protected." It was a compromise. An olive branch. Elena took a shaky breath. "How long?" "Until I'm certain you're safe. A few weeks, maybe less." She didn't like it, but the genuine concern in his expression, the fear she saw lurking behind his controlled exterior, that was real. "Okay," she finally said, "but I'm going home, to my apartment. I'm not moving in here after one day." Relief crossed Lucian's features. "Fair enough." He moved closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "Thank you for trusting me enough to accept protection." Elena leaned into his touch despite herself. "I don't trust you, but I'm starting to believe you might actually care." "I do," Lucian said simply. "More than I should this quickly, more than is probably wise." They stood there in the fading light, the city glowing to life outside the windows, both of them suspended in a moment that felt stolen from time. "I should go," Elena whispered. "Stay for dinner." "Lucian, please." The vulnerability in that single word undid her. so she stayed. They ate together while night fell over Manhattan, conversation flowing easier now, the earlier tension giving way to something warmer. When Lucian's driver finally took her home, Elena felt like she'd lived an entire lifetime in one day. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, exhausted and overwhelmed, and collapsed on her mattress fully clothed for the second night in a row. But this time, instead of anxiety and confusion, she felt something different. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, impossible hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Elena. I'll see you tomorrow." L. She shouldn't smile at the presumption in his words, shouldn't feel warmth spreading through her chest, but she did. Elena fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand, dreaming of steel-gray eyes and a future that shouldn't be possible but suddenly felt inevitable. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of contradictions that left Elena feeling like she was living two separate lives. During the day, she returned to her shifts at Aurelius, serving tables and maintaining the careful invisibility she'd perfected over 3 years. But every evening, Lucian's driver appeared outside the restaurant, waiting to take her into a world that still felt like a fever dream. She saw Lucian almost every night. Sometimes they had dinner at restaurants where the maitre d' nearly bowed when Lucian entered. Sometimes they stayed in his penthouse, talking until the early hours of morning while the city glowed beneath them. He never pushed for more than her company, never demanded anything beyond her time and honesty. But the tension between them built with every passing day, a physical thing that crackled in the air whenever they were close. Elena felt herself changing. The exhaustion that had lived in her bones for years began to fade. The constant anxiety about money, about survival, about simply making it through another day, it loosened its grip. For the first time since her mother's death, she could breathe without feeling like she was drowning, and it terrified her how quickly she was becoming dependent on that feeling. On him. She noticed the security Lucian had promised, always at a distance, never intrusive but present. A man reading a newspaper outside her building. A woman jogging the same route Elena walked to the subway. Protection disguised as normalcy. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt safer than she'd been in years. Tonight, Lucian had asked her to come to his penthouse for dinner. Nothing unusual about the request except for the tension she'd heard in his voice, the careful control that suggested something had shifted. Elena wore one of the dresses from the wardrobe he'd given her, a deep emerald that made her skin glow and her dark hair shine. She'd stopped protesting the gifts after the first week, recognizing that fighting Lucian's need to provide for her was a losing battle. The driver delivered her to the familiar building, and she rode the private elevator up to the penthouse, her heart hammering with an anticipation she no longer tried to deny. Lucian met her at the elevator doors, and the expression on his face when he saw her made heat pool low in her stomach. Elena. Her name on his lips was both greeting and caress. Hi. She stepped out of the elevator, acutely aware of how he tracked her movement, his gaze intense and possessive. He was dressed more casually than usual, dark slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscled forearms. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and the vulnerability in that small detail made her chest tighten. "You look beautiful," Lucian said quietly, moving closer until she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Thank you." The words came out breathless. For a long moment they simply stood there, the air between them charged with everything unspoken. Then Lucian stepped back, creating distance that felt almost painful. "Come," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Dinner's ready." But instead of the dining room, he led her out onto the terrace she'd glimpsed but never visited. The space was transformed, soft lighting strung overhead, a table set for two with candles and wine. The Manhattan skyline providing a backdrop that looked like something from a movie. "Lucian," Elena breathed, overwhelmed by the romance of it. "This is too much?" he asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I was going to say perfect." His smile widened, genuine and unguarded in a way that made him look younger. "Good." They sat, and dinner appeared, brought by silent staff who vanished as quickly as they'd come. The food was exquisite, but Elena barely tasted it. She was too focused on Lucian, on the way he watched her, on the tension she could feel radiating from him. "Something's different tonight," she finally said, setting down her fork. "What's going on?" Lucian was quiet for a moment, his fingers toying with his wine glass. I need to tell you something. Something about what I do, about my world. He met her gaze. And then I need you to make a decision. Elena's pulse spiked. What kind of decision? Whether you're willing to truly be part of my life. Not just the surface we've been navigating these past 2 weeks, but everything underneath. The gravity in his tone made her stomach clench with anxiety. Tell me. Lucian stood, moving to the terrace railing to stare out at the city. Elena followed, standing beside him, close enough to feel his body heat, but not quite touching. I told you I run a criminal empire, he began, his voice low and controlled. But I didn't tell you the specifics, the violence, the moral compromises, the reality of what it means to control territories through fear and power. I knew it couldn't be clean, Elena said quietly. It's not. Lucian turned to look at her, and the darkness in his eyes was absolute. I've killed people, Elena. Not often, not needlessly, but when necessary to protect what's mine or maintain control. I've ordered others to do violence on my behalf. I've made decisions that destroyed lives to preserve my empire. The confession should have sent her running, should have shattered whatever illusion she'd been building about who he was. But Elena had seen enough of the world's cruelty to know that morality was rarely black and white. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because I'm falling in love with you. The words were delivered with brutal honesty, no softness or romance to cushion them. And I need you to understand exactly who you'd be loving back. Elena's breath caught. Lucian, I know it's fast, he interrupted. I know it doesn't make sense. But from the moment I caught you in that restaurant, something in me recognized you, claimed you, and every day since has only made that feeling stronger. He turned to face her fully, his hands gripping the railing on either side of her body, caging her in without actually touching her. But loving me comes with consequences, he continued, his voice dropping lower. It means accepting violence as part of our reality. It means living with security and restrictions and the constant knowledge that my enemies would use you to hurt me. It means becoming part of a world that most people can't even imagine. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. And what do I get in return? Everything I have, everything I am. Lucian's intensity pinned her in place. My protection, my devotion, a life where you never have to worry about survival again, where you can be more than just someone fighting to make it through another day. You're asking me to choose you, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. Completely. Yes. She should need time, should demand space to think, to process, to make a rational decision about something this enormous. But standing there with the city spread out behind them and Lucian's eyes burning into hers, Elena realized the decision had already been made. Somewhere between that first fall and this moment, she'd chosen him without even realizing it. I choose you, she said. Lucian's control shattered. His hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. Say it again. I choose you, Elena repeated, stronger this time. All of you, the darkness and the danger and everything that comes with it. Elena. Her name was a prayer and a curse combined. Then his mouth was on hers, and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It was fierce and claiming and desperate, as if Lucian had been holding himself back for weeks and could finally let go. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Elena melted into him with a small sound of surrender. She'd been kissed before, fumbling teenage attempts and one disastrous relationship in college. But this was different. This was being consumed and cherished and claimed all at once, Lucian's mouth moving over hers with a possessiveness that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you, he said roughly. What took you so long? Elena managed, her fingers clutching the front of his shirt to keep herself steady. His laugh was low and dark. I was trying to be a gentleman, trying to give you time to be sure. I'm sure. Lucian pulled back to study her face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw there satisfied him, because he smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his harsh features into something beautiful. Come inside, he said, taking her hand. There's more we need to discuss. They settled on the couch in his living room, Elena tucked against his side in a way that felt both natural and intimate. Lucian's arm wrapped around her shoulders, holding her close, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now I need to make you untouchable," Lucian said. "I need to ensure that every person in my world understands that you're under my protection, that hurting you means declaring war on me." The casual way he discussed making her safe through intimidation should have been alarming. Instead, Elena felt a strange sense of security settle over her. "How do you do that?" "By making you visible, by bringing you into my world officially." He paused. "There's an event in 3 days, a gathering of the families that control this city. I want you there with me." Elena tensed. "Won't that be dangerous? You said making me visible would make me a target." "It's a calculated risk," Lucian acknowledged, "but the alternative is worse. Right now you're a rumor, a weakness my enemies can exploit because they don't know how important you are or how protected. Once I claim you publicly, the calculus changes. Attacking you becomes attacking me directly, and no one is that foolish." "You make it sound like a chess game." "It is." His fingers stroked through her hair absently. "Everything in my world is strategy and power dynamics. I'm simply making sure you're protected by the right moves." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing. "And if I go to this event? If I stand beside you publicly, what does that make me?" "Mine," Lucian said simply. "Completely and irrevocably mine." The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down her spine. "I'm not a possession." "No," he agreed. "You're so much more than that. You're my partner, my equal, the one person in this world I trust with the truth of who I am." He tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. "But in my world, claiming you publicly is how I protect you. It's the language everyone understands." Elena searched his eyes, looking for any sign of manipulation or control. But all she saw was fierce protectiveness and something that looked terrifyingly like devotion. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." Lucian's relief was palpable. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me." They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other, the city lights creating patterns on the walls around them. Elena felt safe in a way she hadn't since before her mother got sick, as if Lucian's presence created a bubble where nothing could hurt her. "Tell me about your childhood," she said eventually, curious about the man holding her. Lucian tensed slightly. "That's not a pleasant story." "I don't need pleasant, I need honest." He was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might refuse. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "I grew up in Brooklyn, not the trendy, gentrified Brooklyn of today, but the dangerous, poverty-stricken Brooklyn of 30 years ago." His voice was distant, remembering. "My father was a drunk who disappeared when I was 5. My mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep us fed, but it was never enough." Elena listened without interrupting, her hand resting over his heart. "I was 12 when she died," Lucian continued. "Heart attack, probably from exhaustion and stress. I ended up in the system, bouncing between foster homes and group facilities, none of them good, none of them safe." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "Don't be. It made me who I am." His tone hardened. "I learned quickly that the world doesn't care about fairness or justice. It cares about power, so I decided to become powerful enough that no one could hurt me again." "How did you build all this?" Elena gestured vaguely at the penthouse around them. "Started at the bottom, running errands for the local crew, proving myself valuable, moving up through intelligence and strategic thinking rather than just muscle." A pause. "I was good at seeing patterns, understanding how to manipulate situations to my advantage. By the time I was 25, I'd consolidated enough power to start my own operation." "And now you control everything," Elena said quietly. "Most of it." Lucian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "But it's exhausting, Elena. Constantly calculating, always watching for threats, never able to trust anyone completely." He looked down at her. "Until you." The vulnerability in his admission made her chest ache. "Why me? Really?" "Because you don't want anything from me except honesty. You're not impressed by the money or the power. You see me, the person underneath all the control and strategy. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. That's rare. Precious. Worth protecting. Elena shifted to face him more fully, her free hand coming up to cup his jaw. I do see you, and I'm not afraid of what I see. Lucian's eyes darkened. You should be. Maybe, Elena agreed, but I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of just surviving. With you, I feel like I could actually live. The kiss this time was slower, deeper, filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Lucian's hands were gentle as they explored her back, her shoulders, the curve of her waist, as if he was memorizing her through touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he said quietly, not for anything except sleeping in my arms. I need you close. The request was so vulnerable, so different from the controlled, powerful man he showed the world, that Elena couldn't refuse. Okay. Lucian led her to his bedroom, the space she'd glimpsed before but never entered. It was surprisingly simple. Dark colors, minimal furniture, focused on the massive bed that dominated the room. He gave her one of his shirts to sleep in, then held her while she changed, his eyes tracking her every movement with barely restrained hunger. But true to his word, when they finally climbed into bed, he simply pulled her against his chest and held her, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. For what? For choosing me, for seeing past the monster everyone else sees. Elena tilted her head back to look at him. You're not a monster, Lucian. You're just someone who survived the only way you knew how. His expression crumbled slightly, revealing the vulnerable man beneath the ruthless exterior. I've done terrible things. I know. She reached up to stroke his face. But you're also capable of this. Of gentleness and protection and caring about someone enough to give them choices instead of just taking what you want. With you, Lucian corrected. Only with you. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two broken people who'd somehow found wholeness in the most unexpected place. Elena woke in the early morning to find Lucian already awake, watching her with an intensity that should have been unsettling but instead made her feel cherished. How long have you been awake? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. A while. His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. I don't sleep much. Too many years of needing to stay alert. Elena shifted closer, pressing a kiss to his chest. That sounds exhausting. It is. He pulled her tighter against him. But having you here, it's the most relaxed I've been in years. They stayed in bed for another hour, talking quietly about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. Lucian told her about his favorite books, surprisingly literary for a crime lord, and she told him about her dreams of traveling, of seeing places beyond the limited scope of her survival-focused existence. Eventually they rose, and Lucian made her breakfast himself, an unexpected domestic skill that made her smile. What? He asked, noticing her expression. Just trying to reconcile the image of a feared crime boss making me scrambled eggs. His smile was slight but genuine. I contain multitudes. After breakfast, Lucian's demeanor shifted, becoming more serious. I need to prepare you for the event in 3 days. There are things you need to know, protocols to understand. Elena set down her coffee. I'm listening. The gathering brings together the heads of the major families that control New York and the surrounding territories. It's neutral ground, a place where business is discussed and alliances are negotiated. He paused. Violence at these events is forbidden, but that doesn't mean it's safe. Politics and power plays happen constantly. And you want me there as what? Your date? As my partner, Lucian corrected. My equal, the woman I've chosen to stand beside me. His gaze was intense. That means people will approach you, try to read you, attempt to find weaknesses they can exploit. You need to be prepared. Elena felt anxiety spike through her. I don't know how to navigate that world. You're stronger than you think. Lucian came around the counter to stand in front of her. You've survived poverty and loss and exhaustion that would have broken most people. Surviving a few hours of political maneuvering will be easy by comparison. What do I need to know? Over the next hour, Lucian educated her on the landscape of organized crime in New York. He told her about the other families, the Calabrese operation that controlled the ports, the Russian syndicate that handled arms dealing, the Irish crew that ran protection rackets in the outer boroughs. He explained the delicate balance of power that kept the city from descending into open warfare. My position is unique, Lucian explained. I'm not part of the old guard families. I built my empire from nothing, which means I'm both respected for my success and resented for not following traditional hierarchies. So you have enemies, Elena said. Many. His tone was matter-of-fact. But they fear me more than they hate me. That's what keeps the peace. And bringing me into this world makes me a target for those enemies. Yes, no point in lying. But it also gives you my protection, and no one in this city is foolish enough to challenge me directly. Elena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the brutal reality with the gentle man who'd held her through the night. What should I wear? She finally asked. Lucian's smile was approving. Already thinking strategically. Good. He gestured toward his bedroom. There's something in the closet for you. I had it made specifically for this event. Elena found the dress hanging alone, a stunning creation in midnight blue that looked like it cost more than she used to make in 6 months. The fabric was exquisite, the cut designed to be both elegant and commanding. It's beautiful, she breathed. You'll be beautiful in it, Lucian corrected, coming up behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Every person in that room will know that you're mine, that you're under my protection, that touching you means war. Elena leaned into his embrace, feeling his strength surrounding her. I'm nervous. Good. Nervousness keeps you sharp. His lips brushed her temple. But you don't need to be afraid. I'll be with you every moment. Nothing will happen to you while I'm breathing. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her shiver. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. What if I embarrass you? What if I don't know the right things to say or... Impossible. Lucian's hand cupped her face. You could never embarrass me. Just be yourself, honest, strong, resilient. That's all you need to be. Elena rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring her gratitude and growing feelings into the contact. Lucian responded immediately, his arms tightening around her, the kiss deepening until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were dark with hunger. 3 more days, he said roughly. 3 days until I can show the world that you're mine. I'm already yours, Elena whispered. The words clearly affected him. Lucian claimed her mouth again, and this time the kiss was harder, more demanding, filled with barely restrained need. Elena felt herself responding with equal intensity, her body pressing against his, her fingers tangling in his hair. The desire that had been building between them for 2 weeks threatened to consume her, and she wanted it. Wanted him. But Lucian pulled back, breathing hard, his control visibly fraying. Not yet, he said roughly. Not until after the event. I need you to be able to think clearly, to not be distracted by this. His gesture encompassed the electric tension between them. What if I want to be distracted? Elena challenged. His smile was dark and promising. After. I promise you, after we get through this event, I'll give you everything you want. But right now, I need you focused and prepared. It was frustrating and arousing and terrifying all at once, but Elena understood the wisdom in his restraint, even as her body protested. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Lucian made sure Elena understood the key players she'd meet, the alliances and rivalries that shaped his world. He taught her how to read people, how to navigate conversations that seemed innocent but carried deeper meaning. And every night, he held her while she slept, his presence becoming as necessary as breathing. The morning of the event arrived cold and clear, Manhattan sharp-edged against a winter sky. Elena woke early in Lucian's bed, nerves singing through her system. Today everything changed. Today she stepped fully into his world, claiming her place beside him publicly and irrevocably. Lucian was already awake, watching her with that familiar intensity. Ready? He asked quietly. Elena took a deep breath, then nodded. Ready? His smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. They spent the day in careful preparation. Elena bathed, did her hair and makeup with more care than she'd ever taken before. The midnight blue dress fit perfectly, transforming her into someone who looked like they belonged in Lucian's world. When she emerged from the bedroom, Lucian's expression made her flush with pleasure. "You're stunning," he said simply. He looked devastating himself. A perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his powerful build, his dark hair swept back, every inch the dangerous, commanding figure he was. They arrived at the venue, a private estate in Westchester that screamed old money and established power. Security was everywhere, discreet but thorough, checking invitations and scanning guests. Lucian kept Elena close, his hand firm on her lower back as they entered. The ballroom was spectacular, chandeliers casting golden light over a crowd that radiated wealth and danger in equal measure. Conversations paused as they entered, heads turning to assess the woman on Lucian Moretti's arm. Elena felt the weight of dozens of calculating gazes and fought the urge to shrink into invisibility. "Breathe," Lucian murmured against her ear. "You belong here. Don't ever doubt that." His confidence steadied her. Elena lifted her chin and met the stares directly, channeling every ounce of strength she'd developed through years of survival. They navigated through the crowd, Lucian introducing her to various people, family heads, lieutenants, power brokers who controlled different aspects of the city's underworld. Elena smiled and shook hands and managed polite conversation, all while feeling like she was walking through a minefield. Most people were cordial, if distant, but she noticed the calculation in their eyes, the way they assessed her relationship with Lucian, looking for weaknesses or advantages. Then a man approached, older, with silver hair and cold eyes that reminded Elena of a predator. "Lucian," the man said smoothly, "aren't you going to introduce me to your companion?" Something in Lucian's posture shifted, became more guarded. "Dmitri. This is Elena Cross. Elena, Dmitri Volkov. He runs operations on the west side." Elena extended her hand. Dmitri took it, his grip slightly too firm, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Charming," Dmitri said, looking her over in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, Miss Cross, how does a young woman like you end up on the arm of New York's most dangerous man?" "Luck," Elena said evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Good or bad depends on your perspective." Dmitri's smile widened, though his eyes remained cold. "Indeed. And are you aware of exactly how dangerous your companion is? The things he's done to maintain his position?" "I know exactly who he is," Elena said firmly, "and I chose him anyway." Something flickered in Dmitri's expression, respect or calculation, Elena couldn't tell which. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Well, welcome to our world, Miss Cross. I do hope you survive the experience." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between them. Lucian's hand tightened on her waist, a warning in his touch. "Dmitri, a word." The two men stepped aside, their conversation too low for Elena to hear, but she saw the tension in Lucian's shoulders, the barely controlled violence in his posture. When they returned, Dmitri was smiling, a cold, calculating expression that made Elena's instincts scream danger. "Enjoy your evening," he said, then disappeared into the crowd. Lucian led Elena toward a quieter corner, his jaw clenched with barely suppressed fury. "What did he say?" Elena asked quietly. "Threats. Veiled but clear." Lucian's eyes scanned the crowd, calculating. "He's testing me, seeing how far he can push. Because of me. Because he sees you as a weakness he can exploit." Lucian turned to face her fully. "I need you to stay close to me for the rest of the night. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. Don't—" The explosion shattered the windows, sending glass and debris flying through the ballroom. Lucian's body covered hers before Elena's mind could process what was happening. The world became a chaos of sound and sensation, screaming, gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke and burning. Debris rained down around them as Lucian shielded her with his own body, his arms wrapped protectively around her head. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice cutting through the pandemonium with absolute authority. Elena's ears rang from the blast. Through the ringing, she heard shouts, the distinctive crack of weapons being drawn, the sounds of people scrambling for cover or exits. The elegant ballroom had transformed into a war zone in seconds. Lucian lifted his head slightly, his body still covering hers, his eyes scanning the destruction with lethal focus. Elena caught a glimpse of his face and barely recognized him. This was the crime lord, the ruthless strategist, every trace of the gentle man who held her at night buried beneath cold calculation. "Can you move?" he asked tersely. Elena nodded, though her entire body was shaking. "Good. When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. Understood?" "Lucian, I can't just leave you." "You can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "There are 3 men moving toward us from the east entrance. This isn't random chaos, Elena. This is targeted. Someone knows you're my weakness, and they're coming for you." Terror spiked through her. "How do you know?" "Because that's exactly what I would do." His hand found hers, squeezed once. "I need you safe so I can handle this. Trust me." Before Elena could respond, Lucian was moving, pulling her up and propelling her toward a service corridor she hadn't noticed before. 2 of his security team materialized from the smoke, weapons drawn, faces grim. "Get her out," Lucian ordered. "Take the north exit. Don't stop until you reach the safe house." "Sir, I need her protected." Lucian's voice was absolute ice. "Nothing else matters. Go!" He looked at Elena one last time, and the fierce emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "I'll come for you," he said. "I promise." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the chaos with a speed that spoke of years navigating violence. Elena's security detail, 2 men she recognized from the discreet protection Lucian had assigned weeks ago, flanked her immediately. "This way, ma'am," the taller one said, his hand firm on her elbow. They moved through corridors that seemed designed for exactly this kind of emergency escape, away from the ballroom's destruction. Elena's mind struggled to process what was happening. One moment she'd been standing beside Lucian, navigating the dangerous politics of his world. The next, everything had exploded into violence. They burst out into a service alley where a nondescript sedan waited, engine running. Her guards hustled her into the back seat, one sliding in beside her while the other took the driver's position. The car peeled out with enough force to throw Elena against the seat. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Who did this?" "Unknown, ma'am," the guard beside her said, his weapon still drawn, his eyes scanning the streets behind them. "But Mr. Moretti's protocols are clear. Your safety is the priority." Elena's hands clenched in her lap, the beautiful midnight blue dress now torn and stained with dust. "He's still back there. We should—" "Mr. Moretti can handle himself," the driver said, his tone respectful but firm. "He's survived worse than this, but he can't focus on eliminating the threat if he's worried about you." The logic was sound, but it did nothing to ease the terror clawing at Elena's chest. Images of Lucian hurt or worse flashed through her mind, each one more horrible than the last. They drove for what felt like hours but was probably less than 30 minutes, finally pulling into an underground garage attached to a nondescript building in Brooklyn. Her guards moved with military precision, escorting her through security doors and up several flights of stairs to what appeared to be a luxury apartment. "This is one of Mr. Moretti's safe houses," the taller guard explained, checking the rooms quickly before gesturing for Elena to enter. "You'll be secure here until he arrives." The apartment was furnished simply but comfortably, a far cry from Lucian's penthouse, but clearly designed for exactly this purpose. Security cameras covered every angle, reinforced doors, windows that were probably bulletproof. Elena stood in the middle of the living room, still shaking, her mind racing with fear and questions. "Can you contact him?" she asked. "Can you find out if he's okay?" The guard's expression softened slightly. "Communication is restricted during active threats, ma'am. But I assure you, if something had happened to Mr. Moretti, we would know." It wasn't enough. Elena needed to hear his voice, needed confirmation that he was alive and whole. Hours crawled past. Her guards remained vigilant but offered no new information. Elena paced the apartment, unable to sit still, unable to think about anything except Lucian facing danger while she hid in safety. It was close to 3 a.m. when she heard movement in the hallway outside. Her guards tensed, weapons drawn, positioning themselves between Elena and the door. Then it opened and Lucian walked in. He looked like he'd been through a war. His tuxedo was torn and blood-stained, his face marked with cuts and bruises, his knuckles scraped raw. But he was alive, whole, standing. Elena's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Lucian hadn't crossed the distance in 3 strides, catching her, pulling her against his chest with bruising force. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. I'm here. You're safe. Elena's hands fisted in his ruined jacket, needing the physical confirmation that he was real. You're hurt. Nothing serious. His arms tightened around her. Most of this blood isn't mine. The casual way he delivered that information should have horrified her. Instead, Elena just held him tighter, relief overwhelming every other emotion. Lucian pulled back slightly, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. Are you okay? They didn't hurt you? I'm fine. Your men got me out before... Her voice broke. I thought you were dead. I thought... Shh. Lucian's thumbs stroked her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I told you I'd come for you. I always will. He kissed her then, hard and claiming, tasting of smoke and desperation. Elena kissed him back with equal intensity, needing to feel him alive and solid against her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian's expression had shifted into something darker. We need to talk, he said quietly. Elena's stomach clenched with fresh anxiety. What happened? Lucian gestured to his guards. Give us the room. They left immediately, closing the door behind them. Lucian moved to the window, staring out at Brooklyn's industrial landscape. Elena recognized the posture. He was gathering himself, preparing to tell her something difficult. The explosion was Dmitri, he finally said. The Russian. He decided to make a play for my territories by eliminating me publicly. But you survived. Because I saw it coming. Lucian's voice was cold, detached. The moment he approached you, I knew. The threatening tone, the calculated insult. He was testing my reaction, seeing how far he could push before I snapped. So you were prepared. As prepared as possible. He turned to face her. But the fact remains that he was right about one thing. You are my weakness, Elena. And now everyone knows it. The words hit like a physical blow. So what are you saying? Lucian crossed the room to her, his expression tortured. I'm saying that loving you has put a target on your back, that every enemy I have will see you as leverage, that your life will be in constant danger as long as you're connected to me. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Are you ending this? No. The word was fierce, absolute. But I'm giving you the choice. Right now, tonight, you can walk away. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere my enemies will never find you. Give you money, security, a new identity if necessary. You can have the peaceful life you deserve, free from all of this. Elena stared at him, understanding dawning. You're trying to protect me by pushing me away. I'm trying to give you options. His hands clenched at his sides. Dmitri's attack failed tonight because I anticipated it, but the next one might not. The next enemy might be smarter, more patient. They might get to you before I can stop them. His voice cracked slightly. I can't lose you, Elena. I can't watch you die because of me. Elena moved closer until she stood directly in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. You told me once that I was strong enough to survive in your world, she said quietly. Was that a lie? No, but you told me that choosing you meant accepting danger and complications, that loving you came with consequences. She placed her hand over his heart. I chose you anyway, Lucian, knowing all of that. And tonight doesn't change that choice. You could have died. The anguish in his voice was raw, unfiltered. If my guards had been seconds slower, if the explosion had been positioned differently, if any one of a dozen variables had shifted, but they didn't. Elena's other hand came up to cup his face. I'm alive, you're alive, and I'm not going anywhere. Lucian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You should run from me. You should be smart enough to walk away. Maybe I'm not that smart. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Or maybe I understand that some things are worth the risk. You are worth the risk. His eyes opened, and the emotion there nearly undid her. Fear and love and desperate hope all tangled together. I love you, Lucian said, the words wrenched from somewhere deep inside him. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too. Elena smiled through her tears. Even when you're being an idiot and trying to protect me by pushing me away. Lucian's laugh was broken and relieved. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Elena agreed, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet safe house while the city slowly woke outside. Finally, Lucian pulled back. There are things that need to happen now. Consequences from tonight. Elena steeled herself. Tell me. Dmitri declared war when he attacked that gathering, not just on me, but on the entire established order. The other families won't tolerate that kind of disruption. His expression hardened. There will be a reckoning, probably within days. And you'll be in the middle of it. I'll be leading it. No apology in his tone. Dmitri crossed a line. He needs to be dealt with decisively, or others will think they can challenge me with impunity. Elena understood what he wasn't saying. You're going to kill him. Yes. Direct, unflinching honesty. Along with anyone in his organization who supported this move. The violence should have repulsed her, should have sent her running despite her earlier declarations. But Elena had spent too many years surviving in a world that didn't care about her pain to judge Lucian for playing by the rules that governed his reality. How long? She asked. 3 days? Maybe 4. Lucian's hand found hers. I need you to stay here. Stay safe. Let me handle this without worrying about you. I hate hiding while you're in danger. I know. His smile was slight but genuine. But this is how you protect me, Elena. By staying safe. By giving me one less thing to worry about so I can focus on eliminating the threat. It went against every instinct, but Elena nodded. Okay, but you have to promise me something. Anything. Come back to me. No matter what happens, no matter what you have to do, come back. Lucian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Always. I will always come back to you. He stayed for another hour, holding her, reassuring her, his presence steady and grounding despite the violence he was about to walk into. Then, reluctantly, he pulled away. I need to go. Need to coordinate with the other families, plan the response. He kissed her softly. My men will stay with you. Anything you need, they'll provide. I just need you to be careful. Careful is my specialty. His smile was dark and dangerous. And motivated. I have something worth coming home to now. Elena walked him to the door, every fiber of her being screaming not to let him go. But she understood the necessity. This was his world, his reality, and trying to stop him would only create the distraction that could get him killed. I love you, she said one more time. I love you too. Lucian kissed her again, deeper this time, a claiming and a promise. 3 days. Then I'm taking you somewhere safe while I rebuild what Dmitri tried to destroy. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that made Elena's chest ache. The next 3 days were the longest of Elena's life. She remained in the safe house, watched over by Lucian's security team, with no contact from the outside world except for brief, encrypted messages confirming that Lucian was alive. She learned to read between the lines of those messages. Situation progressing meant violence was being carried out. Securing assets meant Dmitri's organization was being systematically dismantled. Complications handled meant people had died. Elena tried not to think too hard about what Lucian was doing, tried to focus instead on the fact that every message meant he was still breathing, still fighting, still working his way back to her. On the 4th day, the messages stopped. Elena spent hours in mounting terror, imagining every possible horrible outcome. Her guards offered no information, their expressions carefully neutral, which only made her anxiety worse. It was nearly midnight when she heard movement outside the apartment. The door opened and Lucian walked in looking like death warmed over. He was visibly exhausted, new bruises layering over old ones, moving with a stiffness that spoke of injuries he was hiding. But he was alive. Elena crossed the room in seconds, throwing herself into his arms, hard enough to make him grunt with pain. Sorry, she gasped, trying to pull back. Lucian's arms locked around her, holding her tight despite his obvious discomfort. Don't apologize, I needed this. Elena pulled back just enough to see his face. Is it over? It's over. The exhaustion in his voice was profound. Dmitri's dead. His organization is scattered. The other families have reaffirmed their alliances with me. He managed a slight smile. We're safe. For now. For now, Elena repeated, understanding that this was the reality of his life. Temporary victories, constant vigilance, peace that was always conditional. "Come to bed," she said gently. "You need rest." Lucian let her lead him to the bedroom, let her help him out of his clothes with careful hands that catalogued every bruise and cut. She insisted on cleaning his wounds despite his protests, her touch gentle but thorough. "You don't have to take care of me," Lucian said quietly. Elena looked up from bandaging a particularly nasty gash on his ribs. "Yes, I do. Because you take care of me. Because that's what people who love each other do." Something in his expression cracked open, revealing the vulnerable man beneath the ruthless exterior. "I've never had that before. Someone who wanted to take care of me rather than just benefit from my protection." "Well, you have it now." Elena finished with the bandage and pressed a soft kiss to his shoulder. "Get used to it." They climbed into bed together, Lucian pulling her against his chest despite his injuries, as if her presence was worth any physical discomfort. "What happens now?" Elena asked quietly. "Now we rebuild," Lucian said. "I've been thinking about what you said before. About the violence, the constant danger. About what kind of life this really is." Elena tensed, afraid of where this was going. "I don't want to stop being who I am," Lucian continued. "But I also don't want this to be all I am. Don't want violence to be the only legacy I leave." He paused. "I want to build something with you, something that matters beyond territories and power." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to start transitioning some of my operations toward legitimate business. Use the resources and connections I have to build something legal and lasting." His hand stroked through her hair. "It won't be overnight. Can't be. Without creating a power vacuum that would start another war. But gradually, over time, I can shift the balance." Elena's heart swelled with hope and pride. "You do that? For you, for us, for the future I want to have with you." Lucian tilted her face up to meet his gaze. "I love you, Elena, and I want to be worthy of that love." "You already are," she whispered. "Not yet, but I will be." His kiss was soft, reverent. "I promise you that." They made love then, slow and careful because of his injuries, but no less intense for the gentleness. It was a claiming and a promise, a physical manifestation of everything they'd become to each other. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Real, genuine peace that went deeper than just the absence of immediate danger. "I'm going to take you away for a while," Lucian murmured against her hair. "Somewhere safe where we can just be together. No business, no threats, just us." "Where?" "I have a house upstate. On a lake, completely isolated, security that could withstand a siege." His arms tightened around her. "I want to wake up with you every morning without calculating threats or planning responses. Just live." Elena smiled against his chest. "That sounds perfect." "We'll leave in a few days. I need to finalize some arrangements first, make sure everything is stable before I step away." "I can wait a few more days," Elena said, "as long as I know you're coming back to me each night." "Always." Lucian's voice was already heavy with exhaustion. "Every night, every day, for the rest of our lives." Elena listened to his breathing slow and deepen as he finally surrendered to sleep. She stayed awake a while longer, stroking his hair, cataloging the rise and fall of his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. This man, this dangerous, powerful, ruthless man, had chosen her, had seen something in her worth protecting, worth changing for, worth building a future with. And she had chosen him right back, accepting all the complications and dangers that came with loving someone who lived in the shadows. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, wasn't safe or simple, or anything like the dream she'd harbored before survival became her only goal. But it was real, it was hers, and it was worth every risk. Elena pressed a soft kiss to Lucian's temple and let herself drift toward sleep, secure in his arms, already dreaming of the life they would build together. A life balanced between shadows and light, between the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. A life where two broken people could heal each other and create something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Outside, the city hummed its endless song, sirens and traffic and the white noise of millions of lives intersecting and diverging. But here, In this quiet, safe house, in Lucian's arms, Elena finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, but a person. Not safety from the world, but someone willing to face the world's dangers beside you. Lucian stirred slightly in his sleep, his arms tightening around her as if even unconscious he needed to know she was close. Elena smiled and surrendered to sleep, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Because whatever challenges they faced, whatever dangers lurked in the shadows of Lucian's world, they would face them together. And that made all the difference. The lake house was everything Lucian had promised, and more. Nestled in the Adirondacks, surrounded by dense forest and accessible only by a private road, it offered the kind of isolation that felt less like hiding and more like sanctuary. The house itself was deceptively modest from the outside, weathered wood and stone that blended into the landscape, but inside it was all comfort and quiet luxury. Elena stood on the deck overlooking the water, wrapped in one of Lucian's sweaters, watching morning mist rise from the lake's surface. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could hear Lucian moving in the kitchen, the domestic sounds of coffee being made and breakfast prepared. They'd been here for 2 weeks, and it was the most peaceful Elena had felt in her entire life. No threats, no enemies lurking in shadows, no constant calculation of danger and response. Just mornings like this, wrapped in quiet and possibility. Lucian emerged with 2 mugs of coffee, handing her one before wrapping his arms around her from behind. His injuries had healed, the bruises fading to yellow-green shadows that would soon disappear entirely. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his chin resting on top of her head. Elena leaned back into his warmth. "How different my life is now compared to 6 weeks ago. Good different or terrifying different? Both." She turned in his arms to face him. 6 weeks ago, I was invisible, barely surviving, convinced I'd spend the rest of my life just getting through one day at a time. She paused, her hand coming up to rest over his heart. "Now I'm here, with you. And I actually have a future to think about instead of just survival." Lucian's expression softened. "You were never invisible, Elena. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see you." "You saw me. How could I not?" His hand cupped her face. "You walked into my life and changed everything without even trying." They stood like that for a while, watching the lake slowly reveal itself as the mist cleared. It was Elena who finally broke the comfortable silence. "What happens when we go back?" she asked quietly. "To the city? To your world? Does this piece just disappear?" Lucian was quiet for a moment, his thumb stroking across her cheekbone. "I've been thinking about that. About what kind of life I want to build with you. What kind of man I want to be." Elena searched his eyes, seeing something that looked like determination mixed with hope. "I meant what I said before," Lucian continued. "About transitioning away from the violence. About building something legitimate." He paused. "I've already started. While we've been here, I've had my lawyers working on establishing a foundation." Elena's breath caught. "A foundation? For people like us." His voice was quiet but firm. "People who grew up in poverty, who aged out of the system, who are fighting just to survive. I want to provide resources, education, opportunities that I never had, that you never had." Tears pricked at Elena's eyes. "Lucian, I can't undo the things I've done," he said. "Can't take back the violence or the morally questionable decisions. But I can use the resources I've accumulated to help people who are where I was. Where you were, trapped in survival mode with no way out." Elena threw her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was proposing. "That's incredible. I want you involved," Lucian said into her hair. "Want you to help shape it, to use your experience to guide what kind of support would actually make a difference. This doesn't work without you." Elena pulled back to look at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." His gaze was intense. "You transformed me, Elena. Made me want to be better than I was. This foundation, it's how I prove that transformation is real." They went inside to escape the morning chill, settling on the couch with their coffee while Lucian outlined his vision. He'd been working on it for weeks, apparently, even before the attack at the gathering. Detailed plans for mentorship programs, scholarship funds, job training initiatives, and housing assistance for young people aging out of foster care. "I've already identified buildings we can convert into transitional housing," Lucian explained, his strategic mind fully engaged. Properties I control that can be repurposed. And I'm setting up partnerships with legitimate businesses willing to hire and train our participants. Elena listened with growing amazement, seeing the full scope of what he was planning. This is going to help thousands of people. That's the goal. Lucian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. I'm also planning to step back from the more dangerous aspects of my empire. Hand off territories to trusted lieutenants, consolidate operations, reduce my direct involvement in anything that could put you at risk. Won't that create problems? Power struggles? Probably, Lucian admitted, but I'll manage the transition carefully. Make it clear I'm not abandoning my position, just shifting focus. Anyone who wants to challenge me will have to go through layers of protection and consequence before they could reach us. Elena studied his face, seeing the careful calculation behind every word. You've thought this through. I've thought of nothing else. His expression grew more vulnerable. I want a life with you, Elena. Not just stolen moments between crises, but an actual life. Marriage. Maybe children eventually. A future that's about building something rather than just defending territory. The casual mention of marriage and children made Elena's heart stutter. You're talking about forever. I'm talking about the rest of our lives. Lucian's voice was steady, certain. If you want that. If you're willing to take on a man with a complicated past and a future that will never be completely simple. Elena's answer came without hesitation. I want that. I want you, for as long as you'll have me. Lucian's kiss was soft and reverent, filled with promises and hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Then marry me, he said quietly. Not right away if you're not ready, but someday. Soon. Let me make you mine in every way that matters. I'm already yours, Elena whispered. But yes, someday soon. I'll marry you. The joy in Lucian's expression transformed his entire face, making him look younger, lighter, free from the weight he usually carried. He pulled her into his lap, holding her close, and Elena felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was her future. This complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly gentle man who'd caught her when she fell and refused to let her disappear back into invisibility. They spent the rest of the morning making plans, dreaming out loud about the foundation and the life they'd build together. Lucian showed her property listings for the transitional housing, asked her opinion on program structures, listened intently as she described what would have helped her most during her darkest times. You should run it, Lucian said suddenly. The foundation. You should be the director. Elena stared at him. I'm not qualified for something like that. You're the most qualified person I know. His tone was firm. You've lived the reality we're trying to address. You understand survival in ways no credential could teach, and you have the strength and compassion to help others find their way out. Lucian, I was a waitress 6 weeks ago. I don't know how to run a foundation. So we'll hire people who understand the administrative side. But the vision, the heart of it, that needs to be you. He cupped her face. I trust you with this, Elena. Trust you to make it what it needs to be. The faith in his voice undid her. Elena nodded, overwhelmed but also excited by the possibility. Okay, yes, I'll do it. That's my girl. Lucian's smile was proud and fierce. They spent the afternoon walking the property, Lucian pointing out the security measures hidden throughout the landscape. Cameras disguised as birdhouses, pressure sensors along the access road, a panic room built into the basement that could withstand a siege. Even in this peaceful sanctuary, he'd ensured their safety. As evening approached, Lucian built a fire in the stone fireplace while Elena prepared dinner. The domesticity of it felt surreal, this powerful crime lord chopping vegetables while she seasoned chicken, both of them moving around the kitchen with an ease that spoke of growing familiarity. Over dinner, Elena finally asked the question that had been hovering in the back of her mind. Do you think we can really do this? Build a normal life while you're still connected to that world? Lucian was quiet for a moment, considering. Define normal. I don't know. Quiet? Peaceful? Safe? Then no, he said honestly. We'll never be completely normal. There will always be remnants of my past, connections to that world that can't be entirely severed. But we can build something close, something that's mostly peaceful, mostly safe, with enough security and distance to protect what matters. Elena appreciated his honesty, even as it confirmed her fears. And you're okay with that? With giving up absolute control? I'm okay with choosing you over power, Lucian corrected. With prioritizing our life together over maintaining an empire. That doesn't mean abandoning everything, but it means shifting what matters most. He reached across the table to take her hand. You matter most, Elena. Everything else is just details. That night they made love in front of the fire, slow and intense, memorizing each other with hands and mouths and whispered words. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and each other, Elena felt completely content for perhaps the first time in her life. When do we go back? She asked eventually. Soon, Lucian said. I need to meet with the other family heads, make sure the power transition is understood and accepted. Need to finalize the foundation paperwork and get the first programs launched. He paused. But we'll come back here whenever we need to. This place, it's ours. Our sanctuary. Elena pressed a kiss to his chest right over his heart. I love you. I love you too. His arms tightened around her, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. They returned to the city 3 days later, to Lucian's penthouse that now felt like home rather than an intimidating showcase of wealth. The transition back to urban reality was smoother than Elena expected, partially because Lucian had been true to his word about reducing his direct involvement in dangerous operations. He still attended meetings, still maintained his authority, but he had delegated the violence and risk to trusted lieutenants. His role became more strategic, more removed from the immediate danger. The foundation took shape rapidly. Lucian's lawyers had done their work well, establishing the legal framework and tax structures needed for a legitimate non-profit. Elena threw herself into developing programs, interviewing potential staff, working with social workers and educators to design interventions that would actually help. It was exhausting and overwhelming and deeply fulfilling in ways her waitressing job had never been. She was making a difference, using her experience to help people who were where she'd been, trapped and desperate, and convinced there was no way out. The first transitional housing facility opened 4 months after their return to the city. It was a converted apartment building in Queens offering furnished units for young people aging out of foster care. Each resident received housing support, job training, mentorship, and educational assistance. At the opening ceremony, Elena stood beside Lucian and watched the first residents move in. Young people who looked exactly how she'd felt not so long ago. Exhausted, wary, afraid to hope that this lifeline was real. You did this, Lucian said quietly, his hand warm on her lower back. We did this, Elena corrected. His smile was gentle and proud. Together. Life settled into a rhythm that was neither completely normal nor entirely dangerous. Lucian continued his careful transition away from the criminal empire that had defined his adult life. It wasn't fast, couldn't be without creating instability, but it was steady and deliberate. He focused increasingly on legitimate business ventures, using his strategic mind and extensive connections to build something legal and sustainable. The foundation became his primary focus, alongside protecting Elena and planning their future. They were married 6 months after their return in a small private ceremony at the lake house. No family on either side, both of them orphaned by life and circumstance, but surrounded by the few people they trusted completely. Lucian's most loyal security team, the foundation's first director of operations, Elena's former co-worker from Aurelius, who'd been kind when kindness was rare. Elena wore a simple white dress, elegant but understated, and carried wildflowers from the property. Lucian wore a dark suit and looked at her like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. When they exchanged vows, promises of love and loyalty and partnership through whatever challenges came, Elena felt the rightness of it settle into her soul. This was her family now, her home, her future. The reception was quiet and intimate, just dinner on the deck overlooking the lake. As sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, Lucian pulled Elena into his arms for their first dance as husband and wife. Happy? He asked, his voice low and intimate. More than I ever thought possible, Elena answered honestly. Lucian's smile was genuine and unguarded, the expression of a man who'd found something worth more than power or control or fear. Me too, he said simply, dead. They danced as stars emerged overhead, the lake reflecting the sky like liquid darkness shot through with light. A year after their marriage, Elena stood in her office at the Foundation's headquarters, a renovated building in Brooklyn that now housed their administrative operations, counseling services, and training facilities. The walls were covered with photos of success stories, young people who'd gone through their programs and built stable, hopeful lives. Her office door opened and Lucian entered carrying coffee and wearing the slight smile that still made her heart skip. "How's your day?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Exhausting and wonderful," Elena said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "We just placed our 100th participant in permanent housing." Pride lit Lucian's features. "That's incredible." "We're making a difference," Elena said, wonder in her voice. "Real, tangible difference in people's lives." "You're making a difference," Lucian corrected. "This vision, this heart, it's all you." Elena stood and moved around the desk to settle in his lap, his arms immediately coming around her. "It's us. Everything we've built, everything we're doing, it's because of us together." Lucian's hand splayed across her stomach, and Elena felt the familiar flutter of the secret she'd been keeping for the past week. "Speaking of us," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Lucian tensed slightly, his protective instincts immediately engaged. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Elena took his hand and pressed it more firmly against her abdomen. "Everything's right. I'm pregnant." The shock on Lucian's face was almost comical, his eyes going wide, his mouth falling open, his entire body going still. We're having a baby," Elena confirmed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait until I could tell you in person." Lucian stood abruptly, lifting Elena with him, his arms wrapped around her with fierce gentleness. When he pulled back to look at her face, his eyes were wet. "A baby," he repeated, wonder and fear and overwhelming joy warring in his expression. "We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" Elena asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" Lucian's laugh was broken and beautiful. "Elena, I never thought I'd have this. A family, a real family, something good and pure that came from me." He cupped her face with shaking hands. "I'm terrified and ecstatic and completely overwhelmed." Elena kissed him, tasting salt and joy. "Me too." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and the enormity of the future they'd created. "I'm going to be a father," Lucian said quietly, testing the words. "You're going to be an amazing father," Elena corrected. "You're going to give our child everything you never had: safety, stability, love, and the knowledge that they're valued and seen." Lucian's arms tightened around her. "I promise you," he said fiercely. "I promise both of you. I will give this child the childhood I never had. They will grow up safe and loved and free from the violence that shaped me." "I know," Elena whispered. "I trust you completely." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Elena blooming with health, while Lucian transformed into the most attentive husband imaginable. He reduced his already limited involvement in his former empire even further, delegating almost everything to trusted lieutenants so he could be present for every appointment, every milestone. The nursery at the penthouse was designed with care, a space filled with soft colors and gentle light. Lucian insisted on the best security, the safest furniture, every possible precaution to ensure their child's well-being. Elena watched him prepare with a mixture of amusement and deep love. This man who'd once ruled through fear and violence was now obsessively researching car seat safety ratings and interviewing pediatricians. Their daughter was born on a bright spring morning, arriving quickly and decisively after only 6 hours of labor. Elena would never forget the expression on Lucian's face when the doctor placed their baby in his arms. Absolute wonder mixed with primal protectiveness. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She is," Elena agreed, exhausted but deeply content. They named her Sophia, after Elena's mother. Lucian held her for hours that first day, studying every feature, counting tiny fingers and toes, completely captivated. "I will protect you with my life," he told his daughter, his voice low and intense. "I will give you the world. I will make sure you grow up knowing you're loved and valued and capable of anything." Elena watched her husband, this dangerous, powerful man, transform into a father before her eyes and knew their child would be cherished beyond measure. The first year of Sophia's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful milestones. Lucian was a devoted father, changing diapers with the same focused intensity he'd once applied to strategic planning, learning to soothe Sophia's cries with a gentleness that still surprised Elena. They split their time between the penthouse and the lake house, wanting Sophia to have both the opportunities of the city and the peace of the sanctuary they'd created. The foundation continued to grow, now serving hundreds of young people across multiple facilities. Elena reduced her hours to be present for Sophia, but remained deeply involved in strategic decisions and program development. Lucian's transformation continued steadily. 2 years after Sophia's birth, he formally announced his retirement from active leadership of his criminal operations. He'd spent years positioning trusted lieutenants, ensuring stability, making clear that his territories were protected by layers of defense that made challenging them suicide. He focused entirely on legitimate business ventures and the foundation, using his strategic brilliance and extensive connections for legal purposes. It wasn't a complete severance, couldn't be, given his history, but it was as close to clean as someone with his background could achieve. On Sophia's second birthday, they held a small celebration at the lake house. Sophia toddled around the deck with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never known anything but love and security, chasing butterflies and laughing with pure joy. Elena stood with Lucian, watching their daughter play, and felt profound gratitude for how far they'd come. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up that power, that control?" Lucian was silent for a moment, his arm around Elena's waist, his eyes on their daughter. "Not once," he finally said. "That life gave me resources and influence I'm now using for good. But this," he gestured to Sophia, to Elena, to the peaceful scene around them. "This is what actually matters. This is the legacy I want to leave." Elena leaned into him, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. "I love you." "I love you too." Lucian pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank you." "For what?" "For falling into my arms that night, for choosing me despite every logical reason not to, for transforming me from a man who only knew how to control into someone capable of love and partnership and building something beautiful." Elena turned in his arms to face him fully. "You transformed me too, gave me a future when I'd convinced myself survival was the best I could hope for, showed me what it means to be truly seen and valued." They kissed softly, a gentle affirmation of everything they'd become to each other. Sophia ran over, demanding attention, and Lucian scooped her up with practiced ease, making her giggle with delight. Elena watched her family, her husband and daughter, and marveled at the improbability of it all. 3 years ago, she'd been invisible and starving, convinced she'd spend the rest of her life just barely surviving. Now she had a family, a purpose, a future filled with hope and possibility. All because one night, she'd fallen into the arms of a dangerous man who'd seen something in her worth protecting. All because they'd both been brave enough to choose each other despite the complications and dangers. All because two broken people had found wholeness in the most unexpected place. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Elena felt the weight of the journey that had brought them here. The fear and danger, yes, but also the love and transformation and the beautiful life they'd built from the wreckage of their pasts. She thought about the foundation, about the hundreds of young people they were helping escape the same desperate circumstances that had once trapped them both. Thought about the legitimate businesses Lucian had built, creating jobs and opportunities. Thought about their daughter, who would grow up safe and loved and free from the violence that had shaped her parents. This was redemption. Real, tangible redemption. Not forgetting the past or pretending it didn't exist, but transforming it into something meaningful. Using the resources and lessons from darkness to create light. Years from now, people would know the Moretti Foundation as a beacon for struggling young people. They'd know Lucian as a philanthropist and businessman, not the crime lord he'd once been. They'd know Elena as a director and advocate, not the invisible waitress she'd been. But here, in this moment, they were simply a family. Simply 3 people who loved each other completely, building a life worth living. Lucian caught Elena's eye over Sophia's head, and the love in his gaze still made her heart skip even after all this time. "Happy?" he mouthed. Elena smiled, radiant and complete. "Happy," she confirmed. And she was. Despite the complicated past, despite the lingering dangers that would probably never completely disappear, despite all the reasons this shouldn't have worked, she was happy. Truly, deeply happy. Because she'd been brave enough to choose love over fear. Because she'd found a man who valued her enough to change his entire life. Because she'd proven that even the darkest lives could be rewritten when two broken souls chose each other. As darkness fell over the lake and stars emerged overhead, Elena stood with her family and looked toward the future with hope instead of dread. This was their story. Their beautiful, improbable, hard-won story. And it was just beginning.